Welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast, episode number 34.
You're listening to the Cash Car Convert Podcast with James Kinson.
Hello and welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast. My name is James Kinson and I am the Cash Car Convert. This is the podcast where cash cars are cool and auto debt is dangerous to your financial future. On today's show, I'm pleased to have a New York Times and Wall Street Journal #1 best-selling author, somebody who's been touring this great country of ours over the last 5 years, hitting college campuses both large and small to teach our youth how to handle money. She and her dad just finished authoring the book, Smart Money, Smart Kids. So with that, I'm so pleased to have Rachel Cruze on my show. Hi, Rachel. Welcome to the Cash Car Convert Podcast.
Hey, James. Thank you so much for having me on.
Thank you so much. I have to tell you, this podcast wouldn't exist if it hadn't been for the Total Money Makeover. It introduced me to your dad's teachings, and I started listening to his show, and I started hearing him tell people, sell the car and buy a beater. And I've purchased a lot of cars in my life, and I realized that I have something to offer and that I could help people buy a better beater, something that would be a blessing and not a curse. And even from my small platform, I've already been able to help people. So it's really an honor for me to have you on the show today.
I love that. I love hearing people's stories and journeys of how they've been introduced to us, and the fact that you are going over and beyond to help other people with the message. That just is amazing. Car buying and car payments are a stress and a burden for a lot of people. So the fact that you're a voice to bring peace and calming to this subject is incredible. So thanks for all the work you do.
Thank you. And since this is a show about cash cars, I'd like to start off the interview by asking about how you acquired your first car and how it worked out for you.
Sure. Well, we talk about it in the book, Smart Money, Smart Kids, and it's an infamous Ramsey family story. So if you follow us at all, you probably heard this story. But Mom and Dad told us that growing up, they would not pay for our cars when we turned 16, that we had to save up. And what they would do is match the money we saved. And Dad called that his 401 Dave plan. And it was one of those things I remember thinking in the back of my mind, well, maybe they're not serious about this. Maybe that they'll end up paying for our cars and just let us keep the money we've saved. And my sister, she's 2.5 years older than me. As I watched her do it, save up. And when she turned 16, I watched, very intently to see if they would follow through. And of course they did. They made her pay for half of her car. And I was 13 at the time and kind of went into freak out mode because I had enough money to buy a nice bike, but not a car. And so I went and worked and saved like crazy. And I ended up saving $8,000. So I got a $16,000 car paid for with cash at 16 years old. And I tell people that story not because of the amount of money or even because Mom and Dad matched, because some people are not financially able to do that. But what that taught me is patience, delayed gratification, sacrifice. So much went into buying this car for me. And I drove that car much differently than my friends who were just handed cars. And so you get to experience this emotion of saving up and paying for something. So yeah, the 401 Dave plan, it's probably something I'll do when I have kids, that's for sure.
One of the things that jumped out to me about that experience is that you had your heart set on a particular type of vehicle, and then you wound up not going with that vehicle. And your dad talked about some of the lessons you learned in that you wouldn't have learned otherwise. Do you want to maybe expound on that a bit?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I wanted a yellow Xterra is what I talk about in the book. And nothing wrong with Xterras. I'm not an Xterra hater. But that's what I wanted. I was probably 14 or 15 dreaming about this Xterra. And I remember we went and test drove it right before I turned 16, or I may have already been 16 looking to buy it. And as I was driving it, I honestly just didn't like it. It was bigger than I thought. It was, a little bit rougher. And I remember being so deflated, kind of sitting in that parking lot after test driving it and just saying, I could literally walk out with this car and this is what I've been dreaming about. And Dad really stopped me and he just said, Rachel, this is the biggest purchase you've ever made in your life and probably, that you'll ever make here in the next few years, that's for sure. And you've worked hard for this money. And so you want to buy something that you are going to absolutely love. Don't buy it because we're here and it's convenient. And so we walked away from that parking lot and I was sad. I was frustrated. But we kind of went on this new car hunt, if you will, and found a great car, not an SUV. which I loved, and that's what we ended up buying. So yeah, and you hold on to your money differently when you have worked and saved for it. When you know you're going to spend it, it's going to be gone. And so there's a lot of conflicting emotions during that process, but it's great for me to work through at 16 years old. So I was thankful for that opportunity, that circumstance.
That's so true. I know I've gone through it myself, and I've talked to many other people who have that, they buy their car and they think it's, going to be all this thing to them, like you kind of built up that Xterra in your mind, and then they get it. And maybe day one, they really do love it that much. But, 6 months down the road, it's just another car. It's a tool. It's transportation. And yet, oftentimes they're stuck with payments. So, so glad you used cash to buy that. And, obviously that's the message I'm trying to get out to everybody, as my wife and I are now, cash car converts and working that way. There was another question I wanted to ask you about cars. And I don't typically ask people about, other relatives' cars. But your brother Daniel's story so touched me, and I thought it was so good. I wonder if you could recount that one for us as well.
Sure. Well, when they started the 401 Dave plan, they kind of started it with us kids at the same moment. So my sister got the short end of the stick, because she was closer to 16 in age. But my brother, he's 4 years younger than me, so almost 7 years younger than my sister. So he had 7 years on Denise, to save up and pay. So he, as a little entrepreneur early on, he saved every penny, I think, ever since he was probably, 4 or 5 years old. I mean, just crazy. And saving for this car, and he watched his two older sisters do it. So he actually ended up saving $12,000.
Wow.
And had, technically with the match would have been $24,000. And Dad looks back on that, and when he tells parents about the 401 Dave plan, he's like, set limits, set a limit, because I didn't do that, and it got me in trouble. And Dad sat Daniel down and just said to him, Daniel, we're so proud of the money you've earned and saved, but I cannot give a 16-year-old a $24,000 car. That's just not wise. You're probably going to end up in a wreck. It's not wise for your first car to be that expensive. And that was great, because Daniel wanted a Jeep that cost him significantly less. So what ended up happening is Daniel had extra money left in his savings account from this car, because he didn't use it all for the 401 Dave plan. And I'm trying to remember the math. I think he had $5,000 left.
Okay.
And Dad said, well, Daniel, I'm still going to honor the match, so I'm still going to give you $5,000. And so Daniel technically had $10,000, in his savings account. And he had gone to Peru the summer before on a missions trip. And around the time he was buying his car, within that 6-month period, there was a horrible earthquake in Peru. This was a few years ago. And Daniel told my parents, he said, I want to give the rest of my car fund to the people in Peru. And Dad kind of backed up, and he was like, well, Daniel, that's a lot of money. You're going to college here, in 2 years. And I mean, $10,000, that's a lot of money, Daniel. And we've been taught as Christians in our household that we don't own it, that God owns it all, and we manage it for him. And Daniel looked at my dad and was like, well, Dad, but it's not my money, it's God's money. That's what you taught us, right? And Dad was like, it was one of those moments as a parent, it's like, oh, stab you in the heart. It's like, yes, you're right. That's exactly right. And so Daniel wrote a check to a ministry down in Peru to help with the earthquake and the survivors and all of that. So it's such a cool story that Daniel did that. And I think it leads in not just to a car discussion, but to even a deeper discussion. When you teach your kids about money, it's amazing that money is a magnifying glass. It makes you more of what you already are. And so if you're, raising kids who are grateful, who are givers, that they're giving some of the money they've earned, and they get to experience the joy in giving, and they have such a good attitude towards money, that's going to be magnified when they get more money. And that's exactly what happened to Daniel. A key principle for us growing up was giving, and we had to always give part of the money we earned around the house and our chores. And Daniel felt the joy in that. And so when he had this opportunity to give, it just was, 10,000 times more, probably bigger than he ever gave before. But yeah, just a cool thing for parents to see that your kids, they're watching you when they experience lessons with their own money. They get to do really cool things the older they get. And so that was Daniel's car story. I wish I had a holy story like that, but he's a little bit more holy than I am, because I definitely spent all my money on my car for 401 Dave. But Daniel, such a cool kid and such a great heart.
Well, that's great. Well, and I love your story as well. But, you go into great detail in the book about, how you really revved up your work and how, you viewed, and I'm going to bring this up this way. So many people, they spend their money today and they don't think of what its value will be into the future. And it was interesting to hear you talk about in the book how every time you went to buy something or spend some money, you knew that you weren't just spending, $10 or whatever. You were really spending $20 because your parents were going to match that money into your car. And I thought that was a really great lesson in the book. So there were lots of great takeaways there. Obviously, one of the things is delayed gratification. You had to delay your gratification to get that vehicle. Can you talk about how important delayed gratification is in terms of teaching kids how to handle money?
Sure. Well, it's a key principle when it comes to money. If you're ever going to win with money, you can never be impulsive. There are times, that you can be, but your overarching situation when you're handling money, you need to be patient. And that's what delayed gratification teaches you. And parents today, they really have an uphill battle to fight because of, I think, social media and our technology. Everything is so instant. I mean, it's amazing. Even our iPhones. Just yesterday, I could be walking into work and check email and check Facebook and buy movie tickets, make a dinner reservation, check the weather. I mean, you do it all in 5 minutes. It's crazy how quick our minds have become, and our attention span, really, for that matter. And so that really infiltrates into our money habits. And so what happens is we end up spending money, not only that we don't have, but money we don't really need to spend. And I think through the avenue of debt allows you to have anything you want, even if you don't have the money to pay for it. And that's where people get in trouble. Car loans, obviously a big thing on your show. You see a car you want and you think, well, I don't have 30 grand to spend, but it's such a great car, so we'll just get it today. We'll worry about that tomorrow. And what happens is, you do that twice. You have those car loans, you have the student loan, you have credit card debt, and it just ends up being this entanglement, this burden. And it's all, I believe, because of this idea that you can't have everything you want when you want it, and pushing back against that. And it's so hard. It's so tough. But if you can do that to yourself, my dad has a great quote, which I love. He says that adults devise a plan and follow it. Children do what feels good. And so it's going to not feel fun to delay gratification. It feels so much better to go buy that outfit at the mall, even if you don't have the money. But your emotions are deceiving. And so learning to delay things and to have a plan, and that there's a light at the end of the tunnel, and I think your show's great because you're not saying you can never have a nice car. You make sacrifices sometimes to drive a car you don't want to have in order to save up for a car you do want. You do that in a wise way. And so I think that's big in teaching your kids that, just to have the patience to save up and pay for something, have a goal that they can reach. And once they reach it, it's amazing the dignity that comes with that. When they do experience patience and then they buy something, there's definitely a reward there that you don't get if you just buy it on an instant, and especially with money you don't have.
That's so true. And, sticking with cars here for a second, while income has gone down about 8% 6% since about 2008, the cost of cars has gone up 11%. So car payments continue to go up. I think the average now is $474 a month, and the average term is 66 months. So, people are going in longer and longer terms of debt. And one of the things, I know you work a lot with students, so I know student debt is a big deal for you, but I'm concerned because when you look at the average American, they have almost exactly the same amount of student debt to auto debt. And what I don't see anybody sounding the alarm on is the auto debt. The student loans, they're going to pay off in roughly 10 years, assuming they have the money to do it in the first place. Auto loans and that debt, it's just going to be reoccurring for the rest of their life. So I would like to see more people sound that alarm. So that's something I'm really passionate about. But I wanted to go back and talk about, you were talking about generosity and giving. And I know that was a big thing that your parents taught you. And I wanted to go back and talk about some of the ways they did that, and some of the ways they modeled the behavior. I'm a big believer that, and I've talked about in my podcast many times, how, parents need to know that their children are watching. So you can't be in debt and out of control in your own life financially, and yet try to teach good principles to your children, and have as much credibility as you might if you actually modeled that behavior. So when it came to generosity, what kinds of things did you see your parents do to model that for you?
Sure. Well, I completely agree with you that more is caught than taught. Your kids are going to watch you. Your example is tremendous. And you're not going to be perfect. No parent is perfect. But starting, getting your own life in order, because what your kids are going to see, the sacrifices you're going to make, they're going to watch that, and that's going to speak volumes. And so when it came to giving, and giving is such an emotional part of money as well, and I think it's important for your kids to see you do that, to visually watch. And it doesn't even have to be a big deal. I remember watching my dad. My parents, they filed for bankruptcy the year I was born. And so the first part of my life and my earliest memories is really the repercussions of the bankruptcy. And so things like shopping at consignment sales, not going out to eat, not doing vacation, all of those things that I saw my friends do, we weren't able to do. But one thing I did see consistently was my parents giving. And it was as simple as sitting in church and in my sister's hand-me-down dress, and there was a red velvet offering bag with 2 wooden handles on each side that would get passed down our pew every Sunday. And I remember watching my dad drop a check in that bag. And he did that week after week, week after week. And we didn't know what the check was, but that memory I have as early as 5 years old, watching him do that and just seeing this open-handed mentality. And then other things, I mean, they were very strategic with letting us kids be a part of their giving as well. So when they would go do things, they would take us along, whether it was during holidays and Christmas, but wherever it was, whenever it was, they really involved us in giving, because giving is the antidote to selfishness. And selfishness is what breeds entitlement. It breeds this idea that I deserve everything. And so it's amazing when you're selfish how you handle money versus when you're giving, you're being selfless. You're opening your hand and you're letting someone else get something that you could have had that money and done with something else. But it changes your heart. And so watching my parents do that and letting us experience that as well is a gift that I'm so thankful for, because our big thing, especially for adults and kids as well, but is to be financially in control. And so things like being out of debt, living on a budget, being able to save up for things like retirement and kids' college, and doing all of these things on purpose. But ultimately, you're doing all of this to build wealth, not only to change your family tree, but to give like no one else and to help out. And so that's just the beauty of it. And the earlier you can plant that seed and the earlier your kids can see you doing that, I believe the better off they're going to be.
So, Rachel, I know the book Smart Money, Smart Kids is all about helping parents teach their kids how to win with money. And I have a 4-year-old daughter right now myself that I'm very happy. In fact, we went to one of the book signings, so we got to meet you guys. So that was a lot of fun.
Yes.
Yeah. So we did that. And so I'm really excited about that for her. And I know, having read the book, that there's different stages of the way you handle that teaching depending on the age. Can you just real briefly kind of jump us through the stages of how you handle that based on age through, from the time they're small till the time they're off to college?
Sure. Well, the biggest thing that will change when you're teaching your kids about money is working, this idea of working. And so growing up in the Ramsey house, we were never given an allowance. We were always on commission. So you work, you get paid. You don't work, you don't get paid. And you can start this philosophy, if you will, very early on in life. So if you have children as young as 3 to 5 years old, you can start this, and it's going to be very simple, very simplistic, but you're going to show them that if they do certain things around the house, you will pay them on it. And for these little kids, maybe just 2 or 3 things, but they do something, feed the dog, maybe help set the table with supervision, you just find different things and you pay them instantly. And so when they feed the dog, you hand them that amount of money that you've assigned to that chore, and you say, hey, good job well done, here's your money. And you go take that money and put it in a clear plastic container on their dresser and just let them watch it visually build up. And maybe after a week or 2 of doing a few things and making some money, take that jar to Target or Toys R Us or Walmart and let them buy a toy with the money they've saved. And you're doing that again as young as 3 or 4, 5 years old. And it's very easy, very simplistic, but they start to learn things like working and the idea that money comes from work. Money doesn't come from mom and dad's back pocket. And they learn delayed gratification as they place that money in that jar and they get to visually see it grow. And then they get the reward of buying something. And And even a 4-year-old, they can stick their little chest out at the cashier and pay for that little Lego set or that Barbie, whatever it is. It's amazing the emotion and how much that they are capable of doing even that young. And then when they get to be 6 to 14 years old, I would say increase the chores around the house. There's going to be chores that they do around the house because they're part of the family, but there'll be other chores that they can do, and you can pay them on it because there's so many great teachable moments when your kids work and make money. Because at that age, 6 to 14, you want to get 3 envelopes and mark them give, save, and spend. Pay them once a week on those chores and make them give part of that money first, save some of that money second, and then they can spend some of it third. But they have these 3 envelopes, and they're just being intentional with their money. The money they've made, they're telling it where to go, kind of like a little mini budget, if you will. And you can start that again from 6 to 14. And then once they get to be teenagers, 15 and beyond, I say what my parents did for me, which I loved, was figure out the amount of money you would normally spend on them, put that amount of money into a checking account with their name, a student checking account, and let them handle their money. So when there's cheerleading fees, or they're going out to the movies with their friends, if they need gas for the car, anything, it all comes out of that checking account. And if they need more money than what you've given them, then they have to go get a job, a job. And it's a great thing for teens to do. Go get a part-time job and earn some money as well. And at that point, tactically speaking, they'll be doing chores around the house, but maybe you don't pay them on it when they're teenagers. The money that they've would have gotten comes in that checking account, if you will. So different stages, all very age appropriate. It's not strict rules or boundaries, but those are just some guidelines that we found that are simple, tactical things you can do with your kids to let them feel the responsibility of managing money.
One of the questions that I thought of as I was going through the book is, like I said, my daughter's young now, so it's easy for me to start her off and get her going on the right foot. But much like some people wait too late to start saving for retirement, what if somebody's got a 14-year-old now and they want to start doing something with them to train them up in the ways of money? People probably don't want to extend them too much, on day one, but how do they kind of work them into trusting them to make better decisions?
Sure. I'd say if they're in a place where they're competent kind of what's going on with the money that they're spending themselves, and maybe you've been a human ATM and handing them a 20 every time they've asked, and if they can emotionally handle it, I would say sit them down and just say, hey, listen, we're sorry that we've not been diligent in this area of your life, but what we want to do is we want to set you up to win as an adult. And Andy Andrews, I love his quote. He said, you're not trying to raise good kids. You're trying to raise kids who are going to become good adults. And so as a parent, we're sitting here with you and we want to give you the tools to help you win in life. It's going to sound crazy. You may not like it all the time. And so give us some grace as your parents, but we really want to start this process. And so if you have a teenager, even the checking account discussion, and a lot of teenagers find that exciting if you're able to do that and to say, hey, we're going to give you X amount of money each month, and you're going to be in charge of paying for X, Y, and Z, and we're going to walk with you through that. We're going to help you definitely. I mean, walk beside your teenager. Don't just give it to them and have your hands off. You really want to walk with them, but giving them responsibility, I think that they enjoy it. And it may not be fun because they're not going to be able to buy everything they want to buy, but you're teaching them so many life lessons. And I think as a parent, it's never too late. And especially when you have kids living in your house, you either have the option of teaching them how to handle money or just saying, well, it's too late, never mind. And you're going to let them go off on their own at 18 and make really devastating mistakes with their money. And so as a parent, I don't feel like you have a choice. You have to do this. You have to give them the tools to go out and win, or they're going to come back home and live in your basement till they're 40 years old, which we don't want that either. So helping them, and you're doing that out of love, and you're giving them a gift, and so they can succeed as they leave the nest and fly.
Yeah, that's so true. I mean, you've got the situation where the learning time is compressed, but there's still a lot of great lessons they can learn, and they're still failing in a safe environment where you're there to be their safety net. Like you said, they're not off in college, or they're not off in their own home, making maybe new car buying mistakes or housing mistakes or something along those lines. So that's great advice. Debt is such a big issue in our country, and I know you're well aware of that. What do you think we ought to be doing to try and get people to think more in terms of using cash to buy things? And I know certainly raising money smart kids is a great start, but for those people who are out there who are maybe in their mid-20s or even their mid-30s who didn't get the life lessons that you got, how can they start to make a change in their life and start to turn things around?
I think you personally have to get to a point where you're sick and tired of being sick and tired. I mean, you have to kind of get mad at this point that you're frustrated and you're angry that when you get paid on the 15th, it goes right back out to payments. And you're paying MasterCard and paying Visa and paying the 2 car loans and the student loan. And you have to get to this point where you're wanting a change. Because if you're just kind of dilly-dally, kind of, okay, it's fine, then you're not going to change. But when you get to the point where you are frustrated and you're mad at your situation, you think, I worked too hard to send all my money, $1,000 a month, to these stupid car loans with this car depreciating, sitting in my driveway. I mean, you have to get to a point where you get mad, and that's where people change. And again, they're sick and tired of being sick and tired. And so kind of the plan I tell people to get out of debt is simply this: list out all of your debts, smallest to largest, regardless of the interest rate. Pay minimum payments on everything and attack that smallest debt first. Once that's paid off, you take that minimum payment you were paying and you roll it over to the second smallest debt and you pay that off. And once that's paid off, you go on to the third smallest debt. So we call that the debt snowball. Maybe as you're starting your debt snowball, you do things like maybe you sell the car. Maybe you sell your cars. Maybe you have a garage sale. Maybe you decide that you're not going out to eat for 4 months, and every penny that would go out, to spend on restaurants, you put it towards your debt snowball. You really make sacrifices to win. And being debt-free, I believe, is one of the most freeing feelings you can experience. There's ultimate freedom when you don't owe anyone anything. And your largest wealth-building tool is your income. But when your income comes in and it goes right back out, it's hard to save. It's hard to invest. It's hard to give because you don't own your income. Someone else's name is on it. And so when your income comes in and you're out of debt, there's an empowerment that you have choices now. You have options. And there's just this feeling, and I think people, they get so bogged down, it feels like it's not possible. And I think a lot of it is just putting a plan in place. When you put it on paper, it's amazing what you can accomplish. When you decide, we're going to live like no one else, so later we get to live and give like no one else. And so that's my hope for people, is to find this ultimate freedom with their money and to, I believe, prosper. Because again, when your income is yours, you have options.
This time has really kind of flown by. I wanted to give you an opportunity to talk about any appearances or conferences that are coming up where you might be scheduled to speak, or maybe television appearances or anything you might want to talk about while you're on.
Sure. Yeah, there's a lot of things happening. So I would say go to rachelcruze.com, and all of my dates for the fall and the summer speaking is listed. There's about 15. So there's a lot. And yeah, I'm doing different media rounds. So if you follow me on Twitter at Rachel Cruze, I update that all the time on just different articles and posts and media appearances. So that'll probably be the best way to keep it all on track. So rachelcruze.com, and you can follow me on Twitter.
Perfect. And I'll have all that linked up in the show notes. And where's the best place for people to get Smart Money, Smart Kids?
You can go to any major bookstore across America or smartmoneysmartkids.com.
Great. Rachel, I really appreciate your time on the show today, and thank you for being on the Cash Car Convert.
Absolutely. Thank you, James. Thanks for having me.
Hey, everyone. Every time I have an episode end, I feel like I ought to be saying, that was a really great episode. I'm really pleased with that episode. And the fact is, I always am. So I don't know if it's just the fact that I'm the one who gets to choose the guests on this show, but every time I wrap up an episode, I feel like it's really been a good episode. And I feel that way about this one with Rachel. It's an honor to have her on the show. The Total Money Makeover changed my life, gave me the dream to have this podcast, and I believe I'm helping a lot of people with that. So it's such an honor to have her on. Her family has done so much for me. They don't even know. So it's just an absolute honor. So I want to kick things off and talk about some of the things I took away from this episode. One of the major things I took away is deferred gratification. Now, in the book, they talk about deferred gratification in terms of having your child save up for something when they're small. And then there's also the 401 Dave plan, which is also a deferred gratification play, which allows your child to save up for their own car. And if you have the means, then you can help them financially with that. But if not, then they still learn to save for something that they want. And there's one thing that really, again, we touched on it briefly in the podcast, but really in the book, it jumped out at me so much, that Dave and Rachel had a teachable moment with her car buying decision when she saved her money. She spent 2 years dreaming of a yellow Xterra, and then when she got there, the dream wasn't as good as reality. Now, a lot of us, when we're in that situation and we've had a dream for so long, we just go ahead and go forward. We just charge forward. And especially if we're buying on credit, I think we would be more likely to do that. But in this case, she was able to hold her ground, make a decision to hold off and to wait and make a better decision for herself. And she ultimately did, and she was much happier with that decision. The other thing I thought was really important is the giving aspect of what was taught in the Ramsey household. I came from a mindset that was sort of a poverty mindset. It was like we never quite had enough. And it wasn't like we were on government assistance or anything like that, but it was just this feeling that we were always the ones who were supposed to be getting something given to us, and that we weren't the givers. So now, as I've had an opportunity to give, and that my heart has really changed in that way, it means a lot to me, and it really means a lot for me to pass that on to my children. And so to hear Rachel talk about her dad and her mom modeling giving to them every Sunday in church and tithing, but also out in the community and charitable giving and some other things that are touched on in the book that weren't discussed on the podcast. So really, really good information there. And I highly encourage you guys to pick up the book. The last thing I'm going to touch on is one of the last things I asked her was about what a parent is supposed to do if they have a child that is already a teenager and they haven't really learned about money. And she talked about some ways to kind of slowly integrate them into being more responsible for their own money. I'm going to challenge you, if you're in your mid-20s or your mid-30s or your mid-40s or your mid-50s and you've never really learned how to handle money, it's not too late. Now is the time. You can only change the future and the present. You can't change the past. So I'm going to really encourage you to get a budget, tell your money where to go instead of wondering where it went, and be really intentional with it. And I thought she had a really great point when she said, what's the alternative? If you're not going to teach your kid about money now, when are they going to learn? By the same token, if you're not going to learn about money now, when are you going to learn? So I would encourage you to go ahead and do that. It's never going to be easier than it is today. You're only going to have more complications in your life in the future. Your kids will have more needs, more wants. And so it's better to teach them now. And for the same reason, it's true for you as well. So put a stake in the ground, make a decision to change your life, and start today. If I can be of any service in any way in that effort, feel free to reach out to me, james@cashcarconvert.com. Again, that's james@cashcarconvert.com. So please feel free to reach out to me. The other thing I want to bring up beyond this episode in particular is I've recently been informed that I'm going to be speaking at 2 conferences coming up in September and August. The one in August is the podcast movement, and that'll be here in Dallas, and that will be August 16th and 17th. And that is, as it sounds like, a podcast-specific conference. So if you're a podcaster out there and you would like to come and participate in that conference, I would love to see you there. Love to have the opportunity to meet you. If you'd like to attend the panel that I'm going to be on, which is going to be about how to get A-list guests for your podcast, then I'd be more than happy to meet you there. The other conference that's coming up in September is FinCon Expo 2014, and this is the financial bloggers conference, and only about 20% of the people there are actually podcasters. So I'm going to be on a panel where we're going to try to encourage these 80% bloggers to understand why that they should start a podcast. So I'm really looking forward to that. It's my honor to be able to speak at both of those events, especially given that I'm new to this space. I've only been blogging since August of last year, and I've only been doing my podcast since December. So it's quite an honor for me as a new person in this space to get an opportunity to speak at 2 really great conferences. So I'm really looking forward to that. Now, if you are finding any value in this podcast, it would be a great help to me and to this show if you could go out and leave a rating and review. And what I'm doing right now is I'm currently at 37 ratings and reviews. When I get to 50 ratings and reviews, then I'm going to give away a copy, an autographed copy of the Smart Money, Smart Kids book by Rachel Cruze and Dave Ramsey. And the book was signed by both authors, so it has both signatures. And I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to give that book away to one of the people who've left a rating and review. So it could be you, but here's the thing. The book has so much good content in it. I hope you can defer gratification long enough to be able to wait for me to hit 50 ratings and reviews and to give the book away. So I'm really looking forward to the opportunity to do that. So get out there and leave ratings and reviews so I can give that book away. That's really it for this week. I thank you guys for listening so much. If you want to find the show notes for this episode, it's at cashcarconvert.com/034. Again, if you want to reach out to me, it's james@cashcarconvert.com, or you can always tag me on Twitter @cashcarconvert. And I even have a Facebook page, facebook.com/cashcarconvert. So those are all the really great ways to reach out to me. If you want to provide some positive feedback, got a question, any of those things, reach out and hit me there. That's it for this week. Thank you so much for listening. May God bless you this coming week, and I'll be speaking to you next week. Take care.